Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Grace Academy. This is Natalie Franks with the Grace Alliance. And in this video, we are going to be talking about the recovery process and what this recovery process looks like through a hope-filled lens. So with that, let's dive on in together. And I think before we jump into what this recovery process looks like, really especially in the context of our living, family, or redefined grace groups, I think it's first important for us to take a step back and to evaluate the lens that really many of us involuntarily look through without even knowing it. And this lens that we experience in society today, maybe even in our own households, maybe even in our church, is the fix it mentality. And I want you to think about this question. Can you recover from a mental illness? And today we live in a society that really strives for this overnight fix. And due to this reality, we tend to look through a recovery lens that is very all or nothing. It immediately draws our mind to maybe this idea of recovering from a cold or recovering from a sprained ankle. There's a start to the recovery process, and then there's an end to the recovery process, all or nothing, ultimately reaching this point of being recovered. And so spiritually, we can take on this same fix it mentality, the same fix it approach. Maybe if I pray harder, or if I work harder to strengthen my faith and grow closer to God, then I will recover. This forces us into this works-based mentality that ultimately reinforces a sense of insecurity. It reinforces a sense of fear, and it reinforces anxiety. And this view of thinking leaves people discouraged. It leaves them feeling incompetent. It leaves them feeling worthless and lacking purpose. And thankfully, today I'm really excited to share this with you because there is another option to see this recovery process, and it is a hope-filled recovery process. And so as we look now through this redefined lens of recovery, we want to enter this process of facilitating, knowing that you're going to have your group members coming in who are feeling like they're lacking, like they're missing, that something's wrong with them. Maybe they don't fit in. And we want and we hope that you take this redefined view of recovery and use it to empower them and to encourage them and instill them with hope through the process. And that is exactly what this recovery model is focused on, a strength-based and whole health process. Now, process is in bold because it is a process of change that empowers individuals to rebuild self-worth and purpose. They have worth, they have value, they have purpose, and we're focusing on their strengths rather than highlighting their weaknesses. And secondly, individuals begin to develop a sense of resiliency as they also develop new self-management tools, techniques throughout the curriculum that really aid in this long-term symptom relief. And thirdly, individuals are empowered to build a new sense of community with individuals who are willing to support them, individuals who are willing to encourage them through this journey. And finally, individuals begin to experience a pure and a simple rest in Christ. Now, this means that there is no need to do more. There is no need to be more. There is no need to fix who they are in order to receive God's love. You see, He is love, and that is His constant position and His constant nature towards us. And this is a really, really, really powerful reality for people. This is the first time that some of them can really experience rest in God. And as we dive into this mental health recovery, this lens that is just founded on hope and resilience and renewal, it's important to see that recovery isn't limited to just one area of our lives. And recovery through this lens really encompasses a whole health perspective. And we know that mental health is far more than just a clinical brain matter. The lessons that are found throughout our curriculum, and you can see them as you browse through them, are really working hard to provide individuals with experiences that help renew them spiritually, renew them mentally, physically, and relationally. And due to the fact that mental illness impacts their entire life, mental health recovery has to address this whole health, whole life approach, this perspective. And that's exactly what you will find throughout our entire Grace Group. This perspective sets the stage for experiencing hope, experiencing resiliency, and experiencing renewal. And so, as we move away from this all or nothing, this fix it type of approach, we move into viewing the recovery model, recovery in itself, as a process. And it is important to note that this process is not linear. And the diagram that's going to be depicted on the screen is going to show you that it is not linear. When you move from one stage to the next, it doesn't mean that you're in the clear. You're going to stay at that stage and move forward. And this isn't said to scare you or to make this process that you'll see feel intimidating, but it's really meant to provide hope for those who maybe feel like they've reached a place of stability and then they're bouncing back into this place of distress. And so let's take a look and dive a little bit deeper to see what this process actually looks like. So we see that these are individuals who are living with a mental illness from our Redefine and our Living Grace groups, are entering into this process in a place of distress. There's probably a lot of destructive patterns that are going on, problems that they're taking place in their lives. Maybe they feel like everything is falling apart. This is really this place of distress where individuals are just trying to get by. And thankfully, it doesn't have to end here. The individual moves from this place of distress to a place of stability. And this is where they experience hope. And this often arises as one experiences the support of a loving and accepting community, as well as taking personal steps towards management and steps towards self-care. They now have really gone from this place of crawling to, okay, I've got my 2 feet firmly planted on the ground. And thankfully, it doesn't end right here. We move on to this second stage of recovery and its function. It's here where they begin to build resilience. It's here where they're starting to improve day by day, and they find themselves moving from that place of stability to that place of function. With this new sense of resilience, they're able to now bounce back a little bit quicker when there's a challenge or an inevitable setback that they experience. They've learned these new tools and they've got new skills to support their self-management. Now, this doesn't mean that challenges disappear. Rather, individuals are learning to navigate their challenges from a healthier place of function. So, with their feet firmly planted on the ground at that stage of stability, into function, they're slowly moving forward. And now we move on to the last stage of this process, purposeful living. And this is where life takes on a new sense of renewal. Individuals are no longer trying to get back to how life used to be before their diagnosis or before they entered into that challenging state of distress, but rather they're beginning to create a new sense of normal, a new story, redefined story for their lives. And they're living from a sense of purpose that's not necessarily removed from their challenges or their struggles. And they know now that they are made whole and complete, and God has a purpose for their life here and now. And we see life becoming a new journey for this individual. Now, it's important to really take note that easily this process can quickly become a perspective where we look through our old thinking lens, that it's an all or nothing. When we reach that state of purpose, we're fixed and it's over. And as I said earlier, this is not the case. It's not that all or nothing. Just like the grieving process, the recovery process is not linear. So many times a new episode can occur and the individual, in that place of function or purpose can find them right back in that stage of distress, fighting for stability, fighting for function. And I want to encourage you here, and especially as you're leading these groups for individuals who are going to be going through these stages, it is not a disaster or a personal failure if they find themselves back in that place of distress, but rather it's an opportunity for growth. And each time as they move through these different stages, maybe they'll become a little bit easier. Maybe it won't take as long for them to get from that distress to that place of purpose now that they have learned new tools, learned new skills, and even developed through these stages of resilience and renewal. So, this is the recovery process. What happens for those who are experiencing a mental health difficulty, walking through the living and the redefined grace groups. Now, you're maybe wondering, well, gosh, is there that similar process for family members? And there is. The same takes place for our family members or our friends who are supporting a loved one with a mental health difficulty. And they experience a similar process as they are in the thick of this type of support. And they too can often enter into this equation from a place of distress. They're witnessing what their loved one is experiencing and may personally be dealing with some of the ramifications of what this distress and the destructive circumstances are causing in their life. And life for them may also feel like it's falling apart. They're witnessing the loss of hopes. They're witnessing the loss of dreams that they had for their loved ones. And thankfully, it does not end here. As their loved one moves on to a place of stability, the family member experiences the first glimpse of hope and moves into this stage as a manager. They're now supporting and encouraging their loved one as they take a stand to help them manage different areas of their life that can be somewhat difficult to keep track of or to maintain. At this stage, they are still very much involved in orchestrating this care for their loved one. And although this can be exhausting at times, which I'm sure many of you may have experienced, they're seeing glimpses of hope as their loved one has their 2 feet firmly planted on the ground. And next, as it doesn't stay there, we move on to this stage of the process of partner. And their loved one is moving into this place of function. They are now given the ability to relinquish some of this control. They're able to empower their loved one to implement the skills they've learned. And now instead of managing their loved one, they're really walking alongside their loved one, which is such a beautiful process to see unfold. And these family members are also experiencing a building of resiliency within their relationships with their loved one. And finally, as we move into this last stage of the process, purposeful living, the individual and the family member both move towards a place of purposeful living. Life has this new sense of renewal. They're no longer attempting to change their loved one or get back to the way that life used to be, just like their loved one was probably desiring. Rather, they're creating that new sense of normal, a new relationship, and a new story for their lives. So we see both the individual in our living and our redefined grace groups and the family member through the family grace group, both experiencing a different part, a different type of recovery, but keeping in mind that this process is very much a process. And as we kind of finish off discussing this idea of recovery, we believe that this recovery process was not meant, and it is not meant to be done alone or in isolation. And in each of our trainings, we use this quote from William Anthony out of Boston University as he studied this recovery process. And as he studied this process, he discovered that community was the common denominator in mental health recovery. He determined that everyone in his study who experienced the sense of support from a safe community moved further along in their recovery journey. And this is exactly why these support groups and what you are doing is so important, especially within the church. By facilitating the support group, you are in turn facilitating the recovery process in people's lives, which is so incredibly powerful. You are providing them with that opportunity to experience genuine community and a strong foundation to their recovery process. Now, this wraps up our discussion of the recovery process through this hope and grace-filled lens. And now you will have the opportunity to tune into our next video where I will be walking you through helpful facilitation, healthy facilitation, and communication tips and tools that you can use while you lead your group, as well as some real-life situations and time to give you practice prior to leading your group. So make sure to go ahead and tune into that video 6, which is coming up next.